Welcome to the deep dive. We know you want to get to the heart of things quickly, gain real insight without getting bogged down.
Exactly. And today we're jumping into a really specific, fascinating moment. The artist Bob Camblin in 1972.
Right. We've got a couple of key sources here. There's 1972.pdf, which is basically a timeline of that year for him.
Yeah, his activities, shows, that kind of thing.
And then Bob Camblin quotes and other mysteries.pdf. This one gives us more his thoughts, his philosophy, some dated, some broader.
So our mission, our goal for this deep dive is really to pull out the core insights from these. We want to see Camblin, the professional artist in 72, how he engaged with his community and what ideas were driving him. Might find some surprising links.
Okay, sounds good. So 1972, professionally, it sounds like he was incredibly busy.
Oh, yeah. The timeline lists 6 exhibitions and 1 happening. That's a lot of activity for 1 year.
It really underscores the grind, doesn't it? The constant need to create, exhibit, get seen.
Definitely. Each show, whether it's in a gallery or something more experimental, takes huge effort, and it's all about building that visibility.
It wasn't just local hustle either, right? Getting picked up by Brooke Alexander Gallery in New York, that feels big for 72.
Huge, yeah. Getting representation in a major center like New York is often a real game changer.
Opens doors, I guess.
Yeah.
Wider audience.
Exactly. Access to more collectors, critics, maybe curators.
Yeah.
It signals that your work is resonating beyond your immediate local scene.
And then there's the collaboration, the holding firm, with Staley and Tate.
Right, and the way they got that name, I find that fascinating.
Me too, using the I Ching, the Book of Changes.
Yeah, hexagram number 8, pi, which means holding together. It's about unity, good fortune.
But they tweaked it, didn't they? Holding firm.
They did. Replacing together with firm, it suggests maybe, well, a focus on stability, maybe resilience in their partnership. It feels very intentional.
And it wasn't just a name, was it? They actually built a space.
Physically built out a shared studio, put in a shower.
And the payphone. I love that detail.
Right. It sounds so specific to the time. But the source notes it attracted gatherings of other artists.
So it became a hub. You really get that sense of community building.
You do. Artists form collectives for all sorts of reasons, support, sharing ideas, just practical stuff like studio space. The holding firm seems like it was all of that.
Okay, something else mentioned for 72 is his use of language in his art. Titles becoming part of the compositions.
Yeah, that's an interesting shift. Integrating texts like that points towards a more conceptual approach, maybe.
So not just a label slapped on afterward.
Exactly. It invites the viewer to engage intellectually, not just visually, asking questions about meaning, how words and images connect. It fits with broader art trends, then, towards conceptualism.
Then there's the whole situation at Rice University. Sounds like a bit of a roller coaster.
It does, yeah. First, the letter from President Hackerman saying his contract wouldn't be renewed. That must have been difficult.
Definitely a blow.
But Camblin's response is interesting. He apparently made it clear the art department itself valued him.
Oh, right.
And then subsequently, they offered him a visiting artist position for another year, which he accepted.
So even though the top administration made one decision, the department, his immediate community there, still wanted him.
Precisely. It shows his standing within that specific art circle, even with institutional shifts happening. Speaks volumes about how valued his contributions were.
Really highlights the human side of these things.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk exhibitions. Main Street 2, this traveling show sounds significant.
Yeah, organized by the Houston Chamber of Commerce, traveling to different cities in Texas for almost a year.
Wow, so reaching a much wider audience across the state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Places like San Antonio, Corpus Christi, not just Houston and Dallas. Huge potential for new audiences.
And we even have a review from the time. Eleanor Freed, Houston Post.
Yeah, and her description is vivid. She notes his skill oil wash, watercolor, but also calls the imagery perplexing and often uncomfortable and bizarre. And she specifically mentions recurring fish traps and a superimposed sculptural fish trap.
Fish traps, that's interesting. What do you make of that?
Well, the perplexing and bizarre descriptions combine with that image. It suggests work that was maybe unsettling, challenging viewers. The fish trap could be a metaphor for, well, entrapment, fragility, maybe unseen forces. Layering sculpture on top adds another dimension, too, blurring boundaries.
Yeah, complex stuff. And speaking of crossing boundaries, that trip to Canada.
Right, the University of Manitoba, visiting the architecture department for a week.
Leading design labs, drawing classes, a seminar on environmental design theory. That's really interdisciplinary.
It really is. It shows his curiosity went beyond just the traditional art world. He's thinking about design, environment, how art connects to broader structures. Working with architecture students is quite telling.
Then later in the year back in Houston, there's this event, the next to the last garage sale, at the closing David Gallery.
Sounds very Camblin, doesn't it?
It does. His involvement wasn't just dropping off art, he was actively participating, making up stories for items.
Yeah, dramatizing, the source says. It adds this performative layer. It's not just selling stuff, it's an event, an interaction. And Diane David closing her gallery, that context adds a layer too.
But maybe even more Camblin-esque was the December show. The money is no object, barter show.
Ah, yes, the barter show. That's a really fascinating one.
Trading art for strange and unusual objects, I mean, that directly challenges the whole art market idea, right?
Absolutely. It's a critique of commodification, setting up an alternative economy based on, well, mutual interest and interaction, not cash.
Staley and Tate helped out, but Camblin had the final say on trades.
Which keeps it very personal. It's about his judgment of value, his connection with the person offering the trade.
And that first trade anecdote is perfect. A bowl of Oklahoma acorns for a Camblin drawing.
It really captures the spirit, doesn't it? And his quote about the fairness of people, the value of person-to-person rapport, that explains the whole motivation.
It's about connection, not profit.
Exactly. And Eleanor Freed described the art he was offering: two drawings and watercolors of bizarre and unlovely objects frozen into perpetuity in specimen jars.
Specimen jars. Interesting. Like he's preserving these odd things, asking us to look at them differently.
Possibly, yeah. Challenging ideas of what's valuable or beautiful enough to be art.
And there were other shows mentioned too, Southern Illinois, a couple of camp out shows. He was definitely active.
Consistent engagement, yeah. And that quote from curator Jay Beloli praising the Houston scene and naming Camblin alongside Staley and Tate.
Right. That solidifies his place.
It paints a picture of someone really embedded in that vibrant local scene, but also reaching outwards.
Okay, so that gives us a really strong sense of his activities, his professional life in '72. Let's switch gears a bit and look at the Quotes and Other Mysteries document. What was going on inside his head.
Right. This source gives us more of the philosophy, the reflections behind the actions. We can kind of connect the dots.
Like there's a quote about time. Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years perhaps. That feels wry, knowing we're looking at just 1 year.
It does. A sense of impermanence, maybe. Things change. Exhibitions end. Recognition fades. Or that observation about the cottonwood trees. Dense cluster of new branches. Now with them gone. Look.
Observing change in nature.
Yeah, a deep awareness of flux, loss, but also an imperative to just look, to notice.
He also had these ideas about perception. Look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both.
That's a powerful one. It suggests he saw science and, well, magic or intuition as valid paths to insight. And art and philosophy are where you explore both.
Which connects back to him working with architects, maybe? Seeing connections everywhere.
I think so. A refusal to stay in neat little boxes. And that quote about common sense. I will stick with common sense and try for the perfectly average view of the universe.
Perfectly average. That sounds unusual for an artist.
It does, but maybe it's about finding a balance. Not getting lost in extremes, finding truth in the middle ground. It's intriguing.
And this one really struck me. Art is not just images. Art for art's sake has become art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake.
Ah, that feels crucial. Moving away from art being this detached, aesthetic thing.
Right, to something vital, necessary. Maybe that explains the barter show, too. Art as part of living, exchange, survival almost.
Could be. Art for survival's sake is such a strong phrase. It suggests creativity is fundamental, not a luxury.
And he talks about the process. Step off the train of thought to find the power that is no power, to do the work that is not work.
Sounds like getting out of your own way, letting intuition take over. Less about forcing it, more about finding a different kind of energy. Less conscious control.
Which sounds hard to do.
Very, but maybe essential. And that quote about mistakes. There are no mistakes, you are doing the best you can, and mistakes are nature's way of telling you to trust your instincts.
Okay, that's a good way to look at it. Embracing the unexpected in the process.
Yeah, seeing mistakes as information, guides.
Now, connecting back to the fish traps Eleanor Freed mentioned, I saw this quote from a sketchbook. There, beneath those rocks, poor fish, trapped by the changing tides. So much like us.
Ah, there it is. That's a direct link, isn't it?
Yeah. So the visual motif comes right out of this personal observation, this feeling of being constrained maybe, like the fish trapped by
It
tides.
makes that imagery much more personal, more resonant. It's not just a bizarre image. It's tied to this feeling about the human condition.
And his view on the artist's role.
Yeah.
The artist today is the only free agent. He is not committed except so much as he desires it.
A declaration of independence, almost.
Yeah. Choosing your own commitments. Fits with the barter show, the interdisciplinary stuff, carving his own path.
Definitely. And he seems very aware of the changing art world, too. In a time of consumer art, to make something truly unique in its intimacy. Concept has definitely replaced most of the traditional standards.
That sounds like something someone could write today.
It really does. He saw that shift towards concept, the challenges of consumerism, and he's asking himself, what compromise can one make at this time? He's grappling with it.
And this last one feels really important. The standard sign against the sunset, only we know what that means. Knowledge does not and cannot educate. The feeling cannot be transferred except by experience.
That really emphasizes subjective experience, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can't just tell someone the feeling, they have to experience it, which is kind of what art tries to do, maybe.
Exactly. It highlights that deep, visceral understanding that goes beyond just knowing facts. It's about feeling, shared experience, personal meaning.
So wrapping up this deep dive on Camblin in 72, it feels like we've seen this really intense year. Professional successes, challenges like at Rice, community building with the holding firm, radical experiments like the barter show.
Yeah, and all underpinned by this really thoughtful, evolving philosophy we see in the quotes. It's a fascinating snapshot, a microcosm of an artistic life, really.
It really is a lot packed into one year.
You see him navigating the art world, building connections, but also constantly questioning, observing, reflecting.
So a final thought for people to chew on. Thinking about that barter show and his comments on participation, how does exchange interaction change how we value art, especially now in our super digital, often disconnected world?
That's a great question. And maybe also, does that idea of seeking a perfectly average view, does that offer a useful way to balance science and magic, the objective and subjective, in how we see the world today?
Or maybe thinking about Rice. What is the role of institutions in supporting artists? Can that structure help, or does it inevitably hinder that free agent spirit Camblin talked about?
Lots to think about there.
Hopefully digging into Bob Camblin's 1972 has sparked some ideas, giving you some insights into that mix of art, life, and community.
Yeah, hopefully it's been an interesting look into one artist's very busy, very thoughtful year.